All right, let's look at water sources. Rural water, municipal water, it's the first thing you think about, especially if you're in the city limits or you have access to rural water. It's going to run you anywhere from $1 to $7 per thousand. Generally, we don't recommend this because in most cases it's not cost effective to use municipal water. Now, there are some positives about it. Usually the water quality is pretty good and it's under pressure, isn't it? So, we don't need a pump. Maybe a booster pump, but generally we don't require that. But usually it's the money end of it that we have to look at. In greenhouses, hoop houses, crops, usually you can justify that, but just in field culture where you don't have a vapor barrier over your crops like you would in a greenhouse or hoop house, you're going to lose a lot of water. So just keep that in mind. Another thing about this, guys, is that, in the drought, usually it's rationed, right? You got something that needs water, you got to water it when it needs it, not when the county or the city says you can use it. So keep that in mind. Okay, irrigation water quality standards. Usually this comes into play when we're working with groundwater. You drill, you're going to need to have that water tested before you go ahead and complete the well. I had one client several years ago drill a well, and I said, be sure to test that water because he was out at the Hilden area, and there's a lot of saltwater contamination in the groundwater aquifer, the irrigation water aquifer, and they didn't do it. And they finished the well, put a beautiful pump house in, a pump, and had it all hooked up to the irrigation system. And I went out to see him, and I said, let me taste some of your water. About gagged me. He had to abandon the whole thing. Well, to make a long story short, he had to sell the place and move somewhere else to do what he wanted to do. He wasted a lot of money. He didn't tend to business. Ideal, you want about 0 to 300 parts per million. That's ideal. Most of us don't have that, but that'd be great. 300 to 600 parts per million is good for most crops. Use with caution. Anything up to 1,000. I will tell you this: things like strawberries will not tolerate 1,000 parts per million. You need to keep that in mind and know what you're growing again, and know what the tolerances of those crops are. Anything over 1,000 parts per million, you're probably going to have to dilute the water, mix it with another source, or going to have to do some serious leaching or some really good monitoring your soil moisture. In Israel, they water with high salt content water, very saline water. And what they have to do is keep that soil really, really moist so that the salt activity doesn't kick in and the plants suffer from that. The drier it is, the more concentrated the salt gets, so you got to keep it wet. Other things you need to be concerned about is the amount of sodium and chloride, and then the sodium absorption ratio. That's just the amount of sodium compared to the calcium and magnesium. The more calcium and magnesium you have, the less problematic the sodium is. But guess what? You have a lot of that stuff, then you have total salt. See, it all is salt. If it's in the water, guys, if it's dissolved, it's salt. All right, so think about all that. Have it tested. Please have it tested. Okay, surface water. A lot of ponds went in last summer. A lot of ponds got dug out. A lot of them were renovated. Just understand that the quality changes seasonally. In the spring, usually you've got a lot of water. As the summer goes along, the water drops. It becomes a little more concentrated in terms of salt. Filtration is usually required on surface water. You've got a lot of algae, just you can imagine what's in the water, right? And then if you're going to have a stream, if you're going to irrigate from a live stream, if that thing's running 12 months a year, you're going to have a permit from the Water Resources Board. Most people vastly overestimate the ability of their pond to serve as an irrigation source for their property. Charles is going to give you an example a little bit later on. All right, how about rainwater? Obviously, this is not going to be enough to run a center pivot on, but if you've got greenhouse, or if you're growing transplants, houseplants, something like that, very good quality water. And what's also nice is you can use that to cut some inferior type of water, high salt water, and then make it usable. But it's just the concept of being able to store it. If you had a good storage system, guys, we've had 10 inches of rain the last 30 days here in Ardmore. If you had a big building, if you collected all that water, you would have some serious water, good quality water. Now obviously if it runs in a pond, it's similar, but this way you can kind of keep the junk out of it, okay? And then most city folk that want a garden don't have room for a pond.